Okay, guys, you have this diagram in your packet, and I just liked it because it's kind of all encompassing. So it tells you, up here that the dendrites are the receiving end, and right, you have your nucleus and the cell body that's kind of doing the interpreting, and then it's sending that signal down to the axon terminals where it will send it to the next neuron or wherever it needs to go. It also has all of the components of the axon. So there are these Schwann cells that have this myelin sheath on the outside. And you'll also notice that there are kind of portions of that axon where there is no myelin, and those are called the nodes of Ranvier. Um, if you guys have heard of MS, right, multiple sclerosis, that is a disease where the myelin is damaged. So, kind of that protective coating that surrounds the nerves, that starts to disintegrate. It's going to cause inflammation and it's going to cause some problems, with memory and things like that. So the actual myelin sheath itself is a fatty protective wrapping around the axons, and it's a phenomenal insulator. And so because of that, it's going to increase our action potential, okay? So it's going to literally speed up how fast our signals are being transmitted, okay? So the more myelin we have, the faster a signal is going to conduct. So that's a good thing. Then we have those nodes of Ranvier, right? Those sections on the axon that don't have any myelin. That's where your actual action potential is going to develop, right? We have to have a signal. It's kind of the same concept as the neurotransmitters jumping through a synaptic cleft. Okay, there's always kind of this jumping going on within the nervous system. And then, like I said, MS is where the myelin sheath is kind of disintegrating, and it ends up attacking a very specific type of glial cell called an oligodendrocyte. And we'll kind of talk about those here in just a second. Okay. Looking at your cell here, so, right, you have your axon in the center, okay? You have the Schwann cell that is surrounding it. You can kind of see a nucleus here, that purple. And then we have this myelin sheath around the inside, that extra layer of insulation. And you can see, so here's this oligodendrocyte cell, okay? They're part of the reason why this is created. So in people with MS, this is starting to degrade, and so it will start to attack those oligodendrocytes, which are just going to even further degrade the myelin sheath on each one of those neurons. All right, quiz time. Just kind of mentally think through these. So which part of the neuron structure produces the stimulus? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Which one processes the stimulus? Should have been the cell body. Okay. All right. Question number 2, the structure that insulates the axon. 3, 2, 1. Okay, should be the myelin sheath. All right, looking at some of our neuroglia characteristics. Okay, so these are kind of the support cells for neurons, and there's different types. They're more numerous than neurons, okay, because they are what's kind of nurturing our neurons. They can divide, they can produce more cells. So when we talk about cells that we kind of think of in the brain and in the spinal cord, if they get damaged, right, they don't do mitosis anymore. So that's going to cause paralysis and things like that. That's not going to affect your glial cells. Okay, those will still, continue to produce more cells. One of the most common types of brain cancer is a glial blastoma. So cancer of the glial cells, and they're usually pretty aggressive and not the greatest outcomes as far as cancer is concerned. So we'll kind of go through each part of those. But if you just look at that basic neuron over here, right? It looks a little different under a micrograph image, but we have our dendrites coming out. They're obviously much larger when you look at a whole neuron. You got the axon, you got the cell body, and then all of these little cells, okay, are on the outside. All of this kind of pink matrix supporting tissue, those are the glial cells. So there are 6 different types of neuroglia. All right, we'll just kind of go through each one of these here. So we have the astrocytes. Um, they kind of look star-shaped. That kind of helps you remember the kind of think of like astrology and or astronomy and kind of going with the stars and constellations and that kind of stuff. They are the most abundant type of neuroglial cell. And where you're going to see this the most is in something called the blood-brain barrier. And we'll talk about that when we do the brain. But basically, it's a giant network of blood vessels that protects the brain, right? It needs a ton of oxygen. That oxygen has to get in through capillaries. And so it's going to act as a protective barrier between kind of everything else that might be floating around, around the brain and actually getting into the brain itself. The second type of cells that we have are ependymal cells. So these are going to create our cerebrospinal fluid, okay? When they do a spinal tap, that's the fluid that they are testing for. You're going to see that when we talk about the meninges of the brain, where that's located, there is so a fluid, this CSF, is going to be all surrounding the brain and it's going to go all down the spinal column. Then we have our microglia. So these are the cells that are going to kind of act as like a white blood cell lymphatic component. So it's going to help to remove any bacteria that might be there, any cellular debris. That's kind of their main job. Then we have the oligodendrocytes. We just talked about those. So their whole job is to produce that myelin sheath. Then we have Schwann cells. Okay, these also produce myelin sheath, but the difference is that these are going to do the job in the peripheral nervous system. Okay, PNS is peripheral nervous system. The oligodendrocytes are going to make the myelin sheath in the central nervous system, which is the brain and the spinal cord. And the sixth type are the satellite cells. So these are going to surround the cell bodies of our peripheral neurons. Okay, it's going to keep those insulated. Okay, here's just kind of a look at each one of these. So here's the astrocyte, right? Kind of a star shape to it, kind of looking at that. They're really close to the capillaries. Some of them can even kind of surround and wrap their legs around the capillaries. Those are called foot processes. So you'll see those there. Okay, remember that makes up the blood-brain barrier, so you're gonna see a lot of that. Those oligodendrocytes, okay, here's that cell, here's the axons with the giant myelin sheath, so there is that. The Schwann cells, kind of the same thing, so 2 or 3 slides back when I showed you that axon, okay, that would have been a peripheral nervous system cell, okay? So we'll kind of do it like that versus, the oligodendrocyte here, you're going to see this very consistent myelin sheath, but remember that is in like the brain and the spinal cord. Those kind of microglial cells, right? They're micro, they're very small, but kind of those bacteria producing cells. And then the last one, we have these little ependymal cells, and they've got some cilia on the other end. And then we have the basement membrane down here. Okay, just kind of looking at this more all together. So here again is that capillary. So our blood supply, and here's that astrocyte, right? The neurons here are these giant kind of tan blobs with that myelin, right, sheath there. Okay, see the oligodendrocytes that are creating the myelin all along those sheaths. We got these little microglia cells and the ependymal cells here along the edge, kind of forming a border.